Okay, so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building on Monday's presentation about the basics of OER. So on Monday, we talked a little bit about what open educational resources are. So in case, I know some folks weren't there on Monday. So so we all sort of have a little bit of the same basis. Open educational resources are teaching materials that are free to access and openly licensed. So a lot of folks will use the word OER as sort of a catch-all for free resources. That's not really the case. They're a specific type of resource that are both free to access and they're openly licensed. And we're going to talk about those open licenses a little bit more today, because that's going to help you as you get deeper into using OER. So OER, as we mentioned on Monday, can encompass almost any kind of, or really any kind of learning material. So that could be whole courses to just individual images. We searched for OER in repositories together on Monday. So if you're interested in finding OER for your discipline, there is an OER guide. You can find it by either searching just on the GCC website. You can just search for OER and the guide will pop up. And then under Find OER, I have a list of different tools that you can use to find OER from a variety of different providers across the world, across the nation and across the world. And then finally, we did touch on that at GCC, we don't list courses as using OER. The official designation defined by California is zero textbook cost and low textbook cost. So zero textbook cost means that the class offers free access to all textbooks and course materials used in the class. And then low textbook cost classes have a textbook and materials cost that is less than $40 total. And OER, like we talked about on Monday, is just one type of material that can be used to make a class ZTC. And we'll delve a little further into that today. Okay, so that's what we covered on Monday. And if you want to delve more into that, I will be sending that recording out to the campus next week when I get it from our Gator folks. Okay, so first off, practical considerations for OER and ZTC. So these are some best practices for equitable access to course materials. I know this is a big wall of text, so I apologize for that, but this is just sort of a guideline for the best practices from A, which is the best case scenario for your students and for you, and then to the minimum that should be offered, which is E. So the best case scenario would be that all course materials are legally free for the student to access online, either open access like OER or through the library. And there are low cost or at cost physical versions offered through the GCC bookstore for students with no or low quality internet access. Then B would be, so the next rung down would be all course materials are legally free for the students to access online without that additional low cost or at cost physical version available through the bookstore for purchase. So all the materials would be legally free for the student to access online. That would be rung B. Then we have rung C. Course materials are low cost and are available for purchase through the GCC bookstore so that students with financial aid can purchase them. And there is a reserve copy available through the library. Then D, apologize, my mouse is very overactive. All course materials are available for purchase through the GCC bookstore, and there is a reserve copy available through the library. And then finally, E, the minimum should be that all course materials are available for purchase through the GCC bookstore. Does anyone know why E would be sort of the minimum that we should be offering at GCC? You can unmute or put it in the chat.
They have to have access to their book.
Yeah,
and I would think that they have to have it through Glendale Community College, and I think the college would need to know. So there would need to be one finite book for the class. So for example, for two of my classes, they have, like a McGraw-Hill or a Cengage book with a web package
Right.
Very specific that, you know, they cannot buy it on Amazon, even though they know about it, like the welcome letter and syllabus, because they won't have that package. So that has to be available in the bookstore. And then I know that there are some students who have their books paid for them through funding.
Exactly.
And so they have to be able to use the funding in the bookstore because they can't use it anywhere else. They get a lot of money, let me tell you.
Yeah. So
our students have it good.
yeah. Unfortunately, though, the max that students currently receive is about $550 for those vouchers. So, and that's for a year. So they do have it good, but some of those books, I mean, if you're in nursing,
right,
some of those can be really high. Yeah.
Thank you for that information. That was
yeah,
helpful.
absolutely. But yeah, I mean, but you're exactly right, though. That is, and some other folks said in the chat as well, the exact same thing. Students with book vouchers, a lot of our students have financial aid that is tied to the bookstore. In addition, also the library uses the bookstore list. That's what we rely on when we're updating our reserves collection, when we're seeing if we can provide extended access to ebooks that are being used in your classes. So I know a lot of folks, like, you know, the bookstore price can be a little higher, and definitely let your students know about those alternatives to using the bookstore. That's absolutely fine for you to do, but not just know that not every student can go purchase it through Amazon. So, and then, yeah, so Jessica is bringing up some other things with the bookstore as well. Mobility issues, specifically those that keep students from physically walking into the bookstore, could limit their access to materials, and the sellback price is sometimes a fraction of what they paid. Yeah. So the bookstore, you know, it is a Follett bookstore. It is run by a larger corporation. So they are trying to make money, but they actually are very cooperative and very supportive of OER. We are very lucky, actually, compared to some other campuses, with how wonderful our bookstore managers have been with wanting to be able to provide access to low cost print versions of OER. So, you know, it's all a balancing act, isn't it? But so those are the best practices for that equitable access to course materials to ensure that all of your students can get access to their course materials. Of course, we all want to aim for A, but sometimes it's just not possible at this point. We understand that. We all know that, and you have the freedom to choose what you want your students to, you know, learn from. So so even if you can just reduce the cost of your course materials, maybe use a less expensive textbook, or consider not using a homework system, anything that we can do to reduce cost for students really increases their access. Okay, so the steps to ZTC. So if you are being able to go fully zero textbook cost or low textbook cost, so again, zero textbook cost is zero cost for materials. Low textbook cost is under $40 total. So the steps would be to search for alternatives to your current book, so OER, then finding also library ebooks, articles, and streaming media. If you want to, if you have a book in mind that you'd like to see if the library can license for you, you can always contact your division's liaison librarian to search for additional licensable ebooks. That also goes for streaming media and journal sources as well. And then also finding freely available sources on the web. So that would include more along the lines, and I'm going to show you, this is all a little convoluted because we're sort of doing the sort of external pieces of the OER and ZTC search. So I apologize if this is a little less organized than we hoped for, but we looked at this chart on Monday where we talked about free access versus legally available versus openly licensed. So when we look at this, we can see that you know, there are legally available resources, like in addition to library resources, we have news websites, we have excerpts of copyrighted works that were posted with permission, materials created by you. So some of these would also be fine to link to as well, to use as additional course materials in your class. All right. So, all right. So that's step one, is finding content. Step two is importing the materials if openly licensed, or link to materials in your course. And then 3 is to report that you're zero textbook cost. So you want to report it to your division and scheduling. And that way, then your division can, so divisions will report every semester all of the course sections in their area that are zero and low textbook cost. If you find that your course has not been reported correctly, or maybe you got your course a little bit later and you are going to be zero textbook cost or low textbook cost, you can contact scheduling directly as well if you'd like to have your course listed that way. Then also reporting to the bookstore. You can, if there are print versions of your text, or if you want to create a printed version of your OER textbook that you're using, you can work with the bookstore to stock a small quantity of those for students who do prefer print. And then you also want to let them know that your course is using OER so your students don't inadvertently purchase the wrong material. Okay. And I did want to mention also that some divisions, all of our divisions are a little bit different in how they handle course materials. So some divisions do have an approval process. And then, like I said, the division reports that ZTC and LTC for inclusion in the online class schedule. Okay. Are there any questions about those steps or the best practices for equitable access to course materials?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I rely quite heavily on films in my courses, and a colleague warned me that using Swank, so I use Swank Digital Campus a lot. They said that doing that too often costs GCC, particularly the library, a lot of money. So should instructors hold off on the frequency with which they request films for licensing?
So we do have a package of materials that a package of a certain number of films that we can license per year, but we can always add on to it. Really, I would just submit it, and we always analyze it. So whenever you submit a request for a film, we look at that request and we approve it. So there's no harm in submitting.
Okay.
Yeah, if it ends up being that like we don't have enough licenses or whatever's happening, then we'll contact you and we can like work through, prioritize the most important ones and things like that. But yeah, don't just submit it. Just ask. There's no harm in asking. We don't get upset about that at all. Yes, Sydney.
Let me do this. Hi.
Hi.
Just in piggybacking off Jessica's questions, does GCC have a wide subscription to Canopy, correct? Is that available to everyone? Okay, so Canopy has quite a few films that are available. Okay, I just wanted to clarify and see if we still had that.
Oh, yes. And we're actually going to look at a little bit at our library resources later on today. So
awesome.
Okay. All right, so we will move on from here then. All right, so now let's talk a little bit. So I mentioned briefly, you want to import those materials into your course. We'll talk about that. But before we do that, a brief copyright interlude, as I threatened on Monday. Okay, so what is copyright? Copyright is a legal term that gives exclusive rights to creators of works created in a tangible medium. It is one form of intellectual property. So basically, you all are copyright holders. So copyright law today states that once you have fixed your creation in a tangible form, then you own the rights to that material. So there are some exceptions like work for hire, like, if you were hired specifically to create a logo for GCC, and you signed away that copyright to GCC. GCC now owns the copyright to that logo, right? But that is not the majority of what you're doing. As faculty, you own the content that you create. So yeah, you're all copyright holders. A copyright holder must grant permission to use their work to anyone who wishes to publish, copy, adapt, perform, translate, or in any other way use the work.
Okay, Carolyn,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me just be clear. So if GCC paid me to create a new course shell for a class that I pitched, then that would be GCC's course shell.
No,
If they paid me, like if
No.
they paid me,
no. So,
No.
so GCC, if
they don't, but
No,
if they
they don't.
did,
they do pay you, but you as a faculty member, there are administrative regulations that state that you have ownership over that material. If you didn't have ownership, if there was like a different kind of material that you were creating in cooperation with a lot of funding from GCC, they may, write a contract with you about, the district owning part of the copyright. But that is not the case for you creating educational materials in your Canvas course shell. You still own the copyright over that content.
even if like it's grant funding and you get extra money for it.
It may be in the contract that GCC, I mean, everything I've heard, like, so people on sabbatical have checked in with Dr. Ritter Brown before about this when I was helping them, with OER, and he said that absolutely they own the copyright over it, even
Great.
when they're
Okay.
getting, a sabbatical to write.
You're an amazing lady. You have so much information. It's just impressive. What department do you teach in? I'm just curious.
I'm in the library.
Wow. I know who to come to now, sister. I'm coming
Okay,
to
perfect.
you. Thank you.
Anytime. So, so that's copyright, right? Copyright is like all rights reserved. The person who owns the right to copy the material, they get to decide what to do with it. And one of the things, we're going back to this chart. Sorry, I've like really tried different ways to organize this, and it's all overlapping. So I hope that all of this makes sense to everybody. But so as we mentioned here, we've got the free access, legally available, and openly licensed material. All of this is under copyright. But when we get down here to openly licensed, then that means that the person who owns copyright over that material is giving you special permission to use it in certain ways. So let's talk about how how that works. So how can I use OER? You can use it for free as long as you give credit to the original author and abide by their other requirements. So there's a sample open license here. This is what's called an a Creative Commons Attribution License, or CC BY. So you may see it with an image, you may see it written out like this, or you may see it written out even further like this. So this, in a lot of open educational resources, especially textbooks, you will see a Creative Commons license, or you might see it written, just what the permissions that the authors are giving you. You might see it fully written out. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so Creative Commons is the organization that defines some licenses. So these are the most widely used form of open license, and they can provide blanket permissions to those who would like to use their works. So this organization works to increase the content available in the commons, and they provide free legal tools to creators to help them pre-clear their copyrights. So that means that your copyrighted works are going from all rights reserved to just reserving some of the rights. So with Creative Commons, there are 6 different licenses that they define. So you'll see that one that we talked about just now, CC BY. And then you'll see a bunch of other restrictions that they might have on the use of their content. So these are the 4 elements that are sort of mixed and matched in these 6 different licenses. So here we have BY attribution. You must credit the original authors. So every Creative Commons license includes that CC BY. Then you also have non-commercial. That means that you cannot use it for commercial purposes. You using a textbook in your class is not considered a commercial purpose, even though, I guess the college is, making some money by you using the material in your class. That's not what this refers to. What this is referring to is You take a open textbook, you repackage it, and then you sell it for a profit. What this also doesn't mean is that, or another thing that people get confused with non-commercial is they worry about selling a at cost print version through college bookstores. Creative Commons, the organization, has very clearly stated that that is not considered profiting either. That is actually just printing something at cost and charging for, you know, the cost of printing, you know, the cost of paper, the cost of stocking it, and that's it. They're not making a royalties off of it. So that's what non-commercial means. And again, you are drinking from the fire hose right now about copyright and Creative Commons licensing. There's a lot of really great documentation online, both on the OER guide and just available from the Creative Commons website if you need a refresher on this. And I usually like to Google the license whenever I see a Creative Commons license and just make sure that I understand that, you know, that I'm abiding by the license correctly. All right, so that's non-commercial. Cannot use it for commercial purposes. You can't be profiting off of it. Then there's share alike. Share alike means that if you create a version of an openly licensed book or an openly licensed image, you have to share your creation under the identical terms of the original license. So basically, that's just keeping things open, right? And then you have no derivatives. So this doesn't mean that you can't remix it, but it means you can't share a remixed version of a book. You can't share your version of you know, a photo that you then did some digital manipulation on. So no derivatives means you can't share out your own version of it. Okay. Are there any questions about these different? Yes, Erin.
So let's say you remixed a textbook for your class, means you can only share it, like you can only use it in that class. You can't then post it to an OpenStax account and share it again, remixed.
If it has no derivatives in the license.
Okay. Thank you.
Only if that, these are just the different elements that a creator could put into the license. Okay, so with those elements in mind, let's look at the licenses again. So from the top left side down to the bottom right, so we've got CC BY. So that is the most permissive license. You can do anything you want with the material that is licensed CC BY, as long as you attribute the author that you got it from. So that means that you could take an open educational resource that is licensed CC BY, and you could just tear it to bits and make your own version. You could remix it here and there. You could rewrite portions, as long as you say this is based off of this author's work, the original author's work, okay? Then you go all the way down over here to the bottom right, CC BY, NC, and D. So that means that you have to attribute the original author. You can't profit off of any version. You can't profit off of the content, and you cannot remix it and then release that remix out into the world. So when we talk about OER, sort of the gold standard would sort of be in this area. So that's CC BY and CC BY share alike, because those are going to offer other people the most freedom to make their own edition of the work that you distribute out. Okay, now most of us are going to be using Creative Commons licenses more as consumers of information, right? Most of us aren't necessarily going to make our own version of a textbook. We're just going to use that licensed content in our courses. So you're mainly just sort of looking for, if you can, you're looking for this content here that's licensed under this area. Then we also have CC by no derivatives. I do want to mention one more thing about non-derivatives. So Creative Commons as an organization has defined in this license that you can, no derivatives doesn't mean that you can't take a portion of a text. You can make an excerpt. You could take an individual chapter that is licensed no derivatives, and you could include that in a larger, course pack, and that would be legal. You're not making a version of it, you're just making an excerpt. So that is allowed under no derivatives. Of course, if you have any questions as you go out there in the OER world, in the openly licensed content world about what a license means, you can always contact us at the library, contact me, and I can just shoot you an email and say, this is what you're allowed to do with this, okay? So if you get overwhelmed, don't worry. It took me a long time to understand these licenses. The first time I got exposed to copyright and licenses, I was just, whoo, this is a lot to think about. So if you feel that way too, don't worry, help is here. Just contact me and I can help you out. Okay, language can be very confusing. Yes, Aisha, agreed. Okay, any other, any questions about Creative Commons licensing, open licensing? All right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the practicality of what that means. So we talked about finding OER. We talked about a little bit, or I hinted at the fact that you can embed it, make a copy of it, make a print version of it legally, right? Because of that open license. What's fun about OER is that this open licensing can give you permission to make your own versions of the content. So with OER, generally, you can retain the material. You can keep that material in any form. So you can download it, you can print it. That's legal. You can do that. You can also reuse the material. So take that content, keep it unaltered. You can share it back out with the world. You can also revise the content. So you can adapt, adjust, modify, improve, or alter the content. You can make your own second edition of an OER textbook that's out there. And then you can also remix it. So you can take original or revised content and create something new. So you could take multiple OER. You're like, I like this chapter from this. I like these two chapters from this. And you can smush them together into your own OER textbook. And then you can also redistribute. So you can take those revised and remixed OERs and you can share them back out with the world. So of course that depends on the license that the original creator applied to the content. But this in general is what you're looking for with OER. That you can do anything from just retaining that material and sharing it out to making your own version off of the backs of other standing on the shoulders of giants, right? You don't have to start from scratch. Okay, so those are all about the copyright and permissions. Let's get into OER authoring and remixing. So we know we have the permission to do it, but how do we do it? So I've got some links here. We won't go really far into this, but there are quite a few different tools that you can use to author and remix. These are some really, really good workbooks and like self-publishing guides. These can they outline the whole OER authoring process from sort of starting your content, gathering content, licensing, sourcing images, all of that are in these workbooks. So they're really useful for helping you plan out if you're interested in creating your own OER from scratch or you're interested in remixing content. These are really cool too. So if you are creating or sharing out OER content, then you can look at these Creative Commons licensing tools here. So Creative Commons considerations for licensors and the license chooser, which is very cool. If you're not sure what you want to do with your material, then you can work through this and get a license at the end. So, yes. So those are that's your sort of toolkit there. And I'm going to put this, this link in the chat again, in case anybody had to rejoin. I saw someone in the chat said they had to log out and rejoin. So all of the links are live in that presentation. Feel free to click through any of those. And then just a shout out of a couple of OER creation platforms that are also really useful for remixing. So of course, Canvas is a really great tool. It's got a few pros and cons though. So it's a very familiar software. It has accessibility checkers built in, and you can share out either just with the campus or with everyone that uses Canvas through Canvas Commons. The cons, if you are trying to remix some OER content and you want to share out your own edition, it's not shared to OER repositories like the ones that we looked at on Monday. And it's not as easily accessible or remixable by non-Canvas institutions. Now with LibraTexts, this is another really great tool. And what's cool about this platform is that you can contact them to ingest any open educational resource material into their system. And then you can use their editor. You have to, to sign up, you do have to prove that you're an instructor, which basically is just going to be sending them the link to your directory information from GCC. And then they will give you an instructor account and you'll be able to remix your own version of the textbook. So that can be really useful, especially if the content that you want to remix is not in an editable form. So like some textbooks, OER textbooks that'll be out there will only be available in PDF form, right? Not great, but LibraTexts can help you extract that information and then you can make your own version on LibraTexts. So can import and remix content easily, free downloadable formats, and it's supported by a Department of Education grant. So they're hopefully only going to get better. I would say that the cons are that the online reading interface can be a little more clunky to look at. So, but it's a short learning curve with understanding how to use the online interface, but it doesn't look exactly like, an ebook. It's not quite the same as some of the other ones that we looked at on Monday, like OpenStax, but it still is very simple to use. Very low learning curve with that. And then it may eventually require purchase similar to Pressbooks as well. All right, are there any questions about those platforms for authoring and remixing? Okay, fantastic. I did see a question in the chat. If I make a workbook for students using about 50 pages from the OER, how much of the workbook can I estimate it? I mean, print out the material that students can buy from the bookstore. Sora, do you want to, I'm struggling to, so is it you, okay, so it is OER, it's openly licensed. And then how much of the workbook can you share? Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So if it is openly licensed, you can share as much as you want. You can print out as much as you want, you can share as much as you want, but only if it has that open license on it. Do you have a sample of the material that you're trying to share out with your students?
I want to create the copy from the OER, and then I have to request it from the bookstore or the copy center when they come to college, but I don't know how much of the cost could be that shouldn't have to pay, right? I cannot request about the 50 page for student for free. Is that possible?
So if it's openly licensed, you should be able to share it through Canvas for free. And then you can work with the bookstore. You can bring in a printed copy, like an original printed copy.
Right. How much? How much that could be?
It's going to be very cheap because it'll be done through GCC's duplicating. that the bookstore works with GCC's duplicating services.
Exactly, yes. Mhm.
So it's, and it's really pretty cheap. Like you could just do loose leaf,
Okay.
you know, that students could like, you know, put in a binder or something like that. And they can buy it through the bookstore. It's at cost. So it tends to be like very low cost. I don't have a quote exactly on what that is, but you could contact the bookstore manager
Oh, I see.
for
Okay.
prices.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely. Okay, so embedding OER and library materials. So as I mentioned, because you can retain OER in a variety of different ways, you can actually like copy that content and put it into your course. So you can use a built-in import tool if it's available. So I mentioned before LibraTexts as a way, as a method for, let's see here. I guess I closed it, too bad. Okay, but I mentioned LibraTexts as one of the remixing options. That has a built-in import tool that just sort of embeds every page of the content as a page in a module. So that's cool. Some providers have that. You can also search for courses in Canvas Commons and just import that OER content directly into your course. Or if it's not available in either of those ways, you could just link to it, right, out on the web. Or you could embed it by breaking the content into pieces and adding it into Canvas. So you can embed a PDF as a page in a module. Or as I mentioned, you can add links to pages, link to the external website or link to uploaded PDFs. In the notes on this slide, I have some links for tools that you can use to, if you want to break up a larger PDF into smaller portions. There's some links in the notes on this slide. We talked about this on Monday. Yes, Erin.
Sorry,
No
from the
worries.
previous slide, there's a built-in import tool. Is that built in from the OER host?
Yes, from the host. Yes, good clarification. I'll clarify that on that slide. I'll link to the documentation for LibraTexts so that
That would have been really helpful if I had known that when I was importing it. Anyways, that's a
man.
copy paste.
Oh man, okay. A moment of silence for that, for that time. Okay, all right, so licensed and public domain images, if you're looking for licensed and public domain images, this is just sort of something I wanted to throw in about finding open images that we talked about on Monday, but I didn't include in my slides. So there's the google.com image search where you can click on tools. So let's search for lunge again, tools, and then give me my tools. Oh, that's because I'm not an image search. Okay, lunge, images, tools, there we go. Usage rights, Creative Commons licenses. So I can find things that are on websites that are licensing things with open licenses. And then there's also, if you are looking for little icons, like the ones that I used on a previous slide, you can go to Noun Project and there are some really great public domain images there, or licensed images rather. Okay, so then we also talked about on Monday, the zero cost to students option of GCC library resources. So you can find those on the library website. Still did not remember to update that link to the new library website, but it's easy to get to. You can search right here for materials. This is going to search the majority of our electronic resources that we have through the library. Or you can go to our databases A to Z, and you can narrow by subject and see the resources that we recommend. Okay, so linking to library materials in your course. With library materials, the vast majority of them are not going to be openly licensed. So you will want to link to them or embed them into your course shell. So The process is to find material, and then this is sort of this really should be like a subset of one, but like this should be like 1A, but because it's only in two of the two big ebook resources that we license, eBook Central and eBooks on EBSCOhost, you want to check the licensing and make sure that there is unlimited access if you are using it to replace your commercial textbook. Because we do have other access models like, and this is also available on the OER guide under Find OER. There's a Find Library Materials page on here. So we have unlimited access books, and we also have things that are like multiple copies or 1 user copy or 3 user copy. That just means that only a small amount of users can access it at the same time. So it can't be accessed by all of your students simultaneously, in the hour before class when they're doing the reading or whatever. I never did that. But yeah, so there's, that's only in those 2 ebook resources, but the rest of our content is all unlimited access licensing. Then you want to find the permalink. There is information on this page about where to find that link, because basically you want the proxy so that students on campus and off campus can access it. Gosh, okay, find the permalink, add it to your course as a hyperlink. I have instructions here on this slide about how to add hyperlinks in Canvas. Then you always want to make sure that even if you're doing it on campus, that you test your links off campus, just to make sure that your students are going to get that clear and easy access. And then if you have any issues, you can always check in with the librarian and we can help you out. So OER, you can import it into your course with library materials. Because you don't have the right to make a copy, right? You just should link out to it. Again, I keep putting this throughout all of my presentations, but if you want us to license something new or investigate an alternative to your current content that you're using in your class, just contact us. We're happy to help. And this is just a selection of some of the titles that we've licensed for classes and for book clubs on campus. Okay, so that is it for today. That was the fire hose of information, of sort of like the part 2 of the big chunk of OER content we just explored on Monday. If you need any help, you can go on the OER guide. You can also contact me, request a consultation if you'd like to just meet and knock things out. I'm here for you, okay?